I am walking in a dry wash with my head down, trying to keep my shoes off the loose rock that crunches. The sun is still up, but it feels dim anyway because smoke has been hanging over everything for days. I have a small backpack, a gallon jug that is already getting warm, and a length of fence wire wrapped around my hand because I grabbed it without thinking. Behind me, down toward the road, I hear that dragging shuffle that never stays in one spot. When it gets quiet, it does not mean it is gone. It means it found something to stand over. I keep moving. I do not run. Running makes noise, and noise collects problems. The wash bends around a pile of boulders and a cut bank where rain has chewed out a chunk of dirt. A dead mesquite is wedged sideways, roots exposed. I duck behind it and drink 2 mouthfuls, then force myself to stop. If I drink hard now, I will be dry later. I wipe my mouth with the back of my wrist and listen. Far off, a dog barks once and stops. No birds, no wind worth anything. I can smell creosote and old metal from the fence line that runs along the ridge above the wash. I climbed under that fence an hour ago, and the barbs tore my shirt. But I do not care. A torn shirt is not a bite. The cave is not some deep movie tunnel. I find it because the air coming out of the rocks feels cooler. It is a shallow opening tucked under a slanted slab, half hidden by brush and a spill of stones. Somebody could walk past it if he is not looking for it. I crouch and shine my flashlight inside for 1 second, then click it off. The beam shows pale rock, a low ceiling, and a passage that angles down. The air smells dry with a faint mineral edge. No rot, no animal stink. I press my palm on the rock at the mouth. It is cool enough to make me want to sit down and stay. I do not go in right away. I circle wide, stepping where the sand is already disturbed, so I do not leave a fresh straight line pointing at the opening. I look for tracks. I see old rabbit prints and lizard marks, and one set of human boot prints that are at least a day old. The boot prints cut across the wash and head toward the ridge, not toward the cave. That matters. It does not mean I am alone. It means the last person did not stop here, or he did not want to be seen stopping here. I put my ear near the opening again and listen for flies or movement. Nothing. I slide in on my stomach, 1 elbow at a time, and keep my backpack shoved ahead of me so it does not snag. The first chamber is barely a chamber. It is a low pocket where the ceiling drops enough that I have to crawl, then rises just enough for me to kneel. The rock is rough and dusty. There is a thin ribbon of light from the entrance behind me, and deeper ahead it goes black fast. The air is cooler inside, and it does not move much. That is both good and bad. Cool means I can rest without burning through water. Still air means I can get in trouble without noticing. I take out my flashlight again and cover the lens with my fingers so it is a dull glow. I sweep the light in a slow half circle. I see 2 openings, one wider on the left that slopes upward, and one narrow on the right that dips down and disappears. I pick the wider one first because I can turn around in it. I crawl up into it and find that it curves back toward the surface. I can tell by the warmth in the rock and a faint draft. There is a crack in the ceiling where a sliver of daylight comes through, thin enough that it looks like a thread. The crack is too small to climb through, but it tells me the cave is part of a broken, shallow network under the ridge, not a single dead-end hole. I back out and go to the lower passage. It is tighter, with a bend that forces me to slide sideways. I do not force it yet. Getting stuck down here would be a dumb way to end. I go back to the first pocket, sit on my heels, and start thinking in plain steps. I need 3 things first: a place to sleep without rolling into a crevice, a way to keep the entrance hidden, and a way to keep air moving. I also need a way out that is not the main opening, because once I commit to living in a hole, somebody will eventually decide that a hole is worth checking. People did not become careful during the outbreak. People became hungry. Hungry people check everything. I leave the cave. Leaving feels wrong because the opening is a gift and the outside is a trap, but I cannot build anything with just my hands. I crawl out and stay low, using the dead mesquite and the cut bank to keep my head from showing against the sky. The fence line up on the ridge is half collapsed in one section. The posts are leaning, the wire is slack, and a gate panel is down in the brush. That is where the smell of old metal gets stronger. I climb up carefully, testing each step on the slope so I do not kick rocks down into the wash. I take the gate panel first because it is already detached. It is a welded rectangle with broken wire mesh in the middle, too big to carry in one piece. I wedge it under a rock and bend it until the weld pops with a sharp crack that makes me freeze. No answering sound, no shuffling closer. I bend it again, slower, and break it into 2 pieces. I grab fence wire, a couple of loose metal T-posts, and one splintered wooden post that still has staples in it. Dragging that scrap back down feels loud even when I am careful. Every scrape against stone makes me pause and listen. Twice I hear faint movement downwash, and I stop completely, holding the metal against my chest so it does not rattle. The movement fades, then returns, then fades again. I keep going anyway. The longer I stay exposed, the worse my odds get. I slide the scrap into the cave mouth first, then crawl in after it and pull it deeper until nothing is visible from outside. Inside, I start with the entrance. I do not want a door. A door is a message. I want the opening to look collapsed, boring, natural. I build a low wall of rock inside the lip, using flat stones first so it stacks stable. I leave small gaps near the floor, then cover the gaps with angled stones so air can pass but light cannot. I set the 2 metal gate pieces behind the rock layer, not at the front. Metal at the front catches light and looks wrong. I anchor the gate pieces into the dirt with the metal posts, pushing the posts down until my palms sting from the vibration. Then I pack more rock in front of the metal so the whole thing becomes a rock face with structure behind it. I thread fence wire through the mesh and around stones, twisting it tight with my fingers until it bites. It is crude, but it means that if somebody outside starts pulling rocks, he will hit resistance that feels natural, not a clean, man-made seam. When I sit back and look at it from inside, I see the real problem. I just put myself in a box. The entrance is still there, but it is no longer a simple crawl out. It is a project. I tell myself that is the point. Outside is worse. Still, I do not ignore the feeling in my gut that says I am taking a risk that cannot be undone fast. I take my flashlight and crawl to the upward side passage again, the one with the ceiling crack, and I stare at that thread of light until my eyes adjust. That crack is not a way out, but it is a hint. If there are cracks, there may be another opening somewhere. I decide I will not fully seal myself until I find one. Then I look back at the entrance rock wall and realize I already half did it. I make the sleeping spot next. I pick a shallow shelf a little above the main pocket floor, because higher ground matters if water comes in. Desert storms do not ask permission. I clear loose stones with slow movements and lay my tarp down. The tarp is not for comfort. It is for dust and damp and bugs I do not see yet. I set my backpack as a pillow and put my water jug at my left hand so I can reach it without sitting up. I eat a small handful of crackers from a torn sleeve I stole out of a convenience store days ago. The crackers taste stale, but they taste like control. I put the wrapper back in my pocket. Leaving trash in a cave is leaving a record. I try to rest, but resting in a new place is work. Every sound makes my mind build a picture. Rock settling, a pebble shifting, a faint draft through a crack. My own breathing, which I try to keep quiet because sound travels in tight spaces. I force myself to do inventory instead of spiraling. I have a flashlight, 2 spare sets of batteries, a pocket knife, a lighter, a handful of matches in a plastic bag, 2 protein bars I found in a desk drawer, 3 cans of food with pull tabs, a small first aid pouch with tape and gauze, and a cheap compass that I do not fully trust. I also have a thin coil of cord. That cord becomes important later. I do not know it yet, but I still touch it in my bag and feel better. After an hour of half rest, I start exploring again. I cannot sit in the main pocket and pretend I am safe. Safety down here depends on knowing the space. I tie the cord to a metal post I drove into the dirt near my sleeping shelf, then pay the cord out behind me while I crawl into the lower passage. I keep the cord taut. The passage dips and turns, then opens into a longer corridor that stays low. The rock is scratched in places where something has moved through. Could be animals, could be people. I keep my light covered and move slow, one knee forward, then the other. Dust puffs up with each movement and hangs in the air. That dust is a problem too, because it means every trip makes the air worse. The lower corridor splits after about 20 feet. One branch smells slightly damp, the other feels warmer. I go toward the damp smell because water is life. The damp branch narrows, then opens into a pocket where the ceiling is higher and the floor has a shallow depression full of fine sand. In the back, I hear a faint drip. I kill my light and listen. Drip, drip, slow, spaced out. I crawl toward it and find a crack where water is seeping through the rock, not flowing, just forming beads and dropping into the sand. The beads are small, but the fact that water exists here matters. I scrape a shallow trench in the sand with my fingers, guiding the drips toward a flat stone. Then I set one of my empty plastic bottles under the stone edge where the water falls. It will take hours to collect anything meaningful, but it is a start. On the way back, I make my first mistake. I follow the cord until it goes slack, then realize I did not tie it well at the far end. The cord has slipped off a rock and is lying in a loose loop. For a few seconds, my brain tries to pretend that it is fine, that I can just backtrack by memory. The corridor behind me looks the same in every direction. The rock texture repeats. The dust hides detail, and my light is weak because I am still covering it. I stop moving. I sit there, knees pressed into the sand, and force myself to do one clear thing. I take out the lighter, flick it once, and watch the flame. The flame leans slightly toward the warmer branch. Airflow is not strong, but it is there. I use the airflow and the slope of the floor to orient myself. I retie the cord to a sharp rock point, double knot it, and follow it back without rushing. Back in the main pocket, I adjust the entrance barrier again. I notice that the air feels heavier than it did earlier. It is not dramatic, but it is enough that I catch myself opening my mouth wider when I breathe. That is a warning. I do not ignore it. I crawl to the upward passage with the ceiling crack and press my face near the crack, careful not to scrape my cheek. The crack leaks a thin stream of cooler air downward. It is not much, but it means the cave breathes through that fracture. I need to help it. I take my pocket knife and scrape loose grit out of the crack's edges, widening it a fraction without breaking anything. Dust falls into my eyes, and I blink hard. When I stop, I can feel a slightly stronger draft. It is still weak, but it is real. I go back and create a second small intake near the base of my rock wall at the entrance. I do not open a hole you can see from outside. I shift 2 stones inside the wall so a crooked channel forms behind them. Air can slip through the channel and into the cave, but light has to bounce around corners and dies before it reaches my pocket. I test it with the lighter again, shielding the flame with my hand. The flame leans toward the wall channel, then wobbles. That tells me air is entering there and leaving somewhere else. Good. It also tells me that if somebody outside lights a fire near the entrance, smoke can enter that channel. That thought sits in my mind and does not leave. Night comes without me seeing it. The thread of light in the ceiling crack fades until it is gone, and my world becomes the small circle of my flashlight and the dim awareness of rock around it. I eat half of 1 protein bar and take a measured drink. I do not turn on the flashlight unless I need it. Light down here is not just a battery problem. Light changes how you feel. Too much light makes you forget where you are. Darkness keeps you careful. I lay on the tarp and keep my shoes on, because if something goes wrong, I do not want to waste time putting them on with shaking hands. I do not sleep much. I doze, then wake, then doze again. Each time I wake, I listen for footsteps above, for scraping at rocks, for voices. I hear none of it, but silence is not comfort. It is just silence. In the morning, I judge time by the return of that ceiling thread. It grows from nothing to a pale line, then brightens. I crawl to the drip pocket and check the bottle. It has less than an inch of water in it. That is still a win. I take 1 sip, taste grit, and stop. I need to filter it later through cloth, but cloth is limited. For now, I cap the bottle and move it to my sleeping shelf. I make a second bottle catch at the drip and pat the sand flat so I can see any fresh tracks later. If something else uses this water, I want to know. I spend the next hours turning the cave into a place that supports habits. Habits keep you from making stupid choices. I stack rocks to create a low boundary around my sleeping shelf, not as a wall, just a tactile marker in the dark so I do not roll off or crawl the wrong direction when I wake. I create 3 small piles of stones in the main pocket, each pile shaped differently, so I can orient myself even with the flashlight off. I tie the cord line from my sleeping post to the lower passage entrance and keep it there permanently. That line becomes my spine. If I panic, I grab the line. If the light fails, I follow the line. I do not cook. Cooking smells. Cooking uses oxygen. Cooking makes smoke. I eat cold food and hate every bite. The cans are heavy, and I do not want to open them yet because an open can smells and draws insects. I ration crackers, the other half of the protein bar, and a couple bites of canned fruit that I do not finish. I seal the can with plastic wrap from my first aid kit and wedge it in a crack between rocks so it cannot tip. It feels wrong to waste food, but food is no use if it brings a problem to my door. The first outside visitor shows up mid-afternoon. I know because the cave changes tone. There is a faint vibration through the rock, then a scrape against stone near the entrance. Dust falls from the ceiling in the main pocket, light and slow. I kill my flashlight and press myself against the wall near my rock boundary. I keep one hand on the cord line and the other on the pocket knife, which is a bad weapon, but better than nothing. The scrape repeats, closer, Then I hear a wet exhale and a low moan that sounds wrong in a quiet place. The infected is outside. It moves near my blocked entrance and drags fingers across the rock face. The sound is slow, searching. It bumps the rocks once, not hard enough to shift them, then shuffles away. I stay still long after the sound fades because the worst moment is when you assume it left. Later, I crawl to the entrance wall and put my ear near it. I can barely hear the outside, but I hear enough. Wind has picked up a little, brushing the scrub. No human voices, no footsteps. I allow myself to move again. I check the entrance rocks from inside and find a small shift where one stone settled. I retighten the wire twist and wedge another flat stone into the seam. Every little repair down here matters more than it should, because once you block your exit, everything becomes a one-way choice. That night, I decide I need a real emergency exit. Not someday, now. I crawl into the upward passage and push farther than I did before, following the slightly cooler draft toward the ceiling crack. Beyond the crack, the passage tightens and angles up. I slide forward, chest against rock, hips scraping on the rough floor. My flashlight stays off. I do this by touch. The passage narrows until my shoulders brush both sides. I stop and back up an inch, then push forward again with my arms, testing the space. I am not trapped yet, but I can imagine it. I hate that my mind keeps offering pictures. I force myself to focus on what my hands feel, a seam in the rock above, and a small hollow on the right, where the draft is stronger. I press my face near the hollow and feel cool air on my lips. That air has to come from somewhere. I cannot break rock with a pocket knife. I can clear loose stones and widen a crack if it is already weak. I wedge the broken end of a fence post into the hollow and pry gently. Grit falls. I pry again, slower. A small stone pops free and tumbles behind me. The draft increases enough that I can tell without the lighter. I keep working for an hour in short bursts, resting between each because exertion burns air and makes dust. When I back out to the main pocket, my shirt is coated in rock powder and my throat feels dry from dust. I drink one small mouthful and stop. I do not celebrate. I did not make an exit. I made a better vent. That still matters. The next day, I go outside for the first time since moving in. I do it late, when shadows stretch and the wash cools. I do not want to move at full dark because a twisted ankle out here is a death sentence. From inside, opening the entrance is work. I remove 3 stones at the base, reach through the metal mesh, and unwind the fence wire twists I made. My fingers ache because the wire bit into them yesterday. I pull one gate piece inward, just enough to slide through, keeping the rest of the rock face intact. I leave the outer rock pile in place. From outside, it still looks collapsed. The hole I make is low and inside the shadow of the slab. I slip out on my stomach and immediately pull the gate piece back into place behind me, then rehook the wire. I do this fast, not clean. I can fix it later. Right now, I need to not be standing in front of a hole in the ground. The wash is empty in the immediate area. Farther down, near where I came from, I see movement. 2 infected are wandering in loose circles, not coordinated, heads tilted, arms hanging. I do not watch long. Watching turns into staring, and staring turns into thinking you have time. I stay low and move upstream instead, toward the ridge where the fence line is. I want more scrap, more cord if I can find it, and any container that can hold water. I find an abandoned pickup truck half sunk in sand near a shallow bend in the wash. The doors are open. The cab smells hot and stale. I do not climb inside fully. When I reach in and grab a dirty sweatshirt, a cheap plastic cooler with a cracked lid, and a half-full bottle of sports drink that I do not trust but take anyway. I also find a small roll of duct tape in the glove box and pocket it. On the way back, I almost ruin everything. I step on a flat stone that tips and clacks against another stone. The sound is sharp. It echoes off the cut bank and down the wash. The infected downwash react. One turns and starts moving in my direction, not fast, but steady. I drop behind the mesquite and freeze, keeping the cooler tight to my chest so it does not rattle. The infected reaches my earlier track line and follows it in a lazy way, head bobbing. It does not know what it is following. It just knows the sound came from this area. When it gets close enough that I can hear its feet dragging through sand, I shift my weight backward and slide into the cave opening, pulling the cooler behind me. I do not look back. I do not want to know how close it is. I get inside, shove the gate piece, and twist wire with fingers that do not want to work. The infected scrapes at the rocks once, then twice. It bumps the stone face harder this time. Dust falls inside. The wire holds. After a minute that feels longer than it should, the scraping fades. Inside, I sit on my heels and force myself to slow down. The cave air feels thicker after that scramble. I open my vent crack a fraction more in the upward passage, then crawl to the drip pocket and check the bottle again. Another inch of water. I pour it through a folded corner of the sweatshirt into my cleaner bottle, catching grit in the cloth. The water is still cloudy, but it is drinkable if I am careful. I do not have a perfect solution. I have a workable one. I stash the cooler near my sleeping shelf and use the duct tape to patch the worst crack in the lid. Not airtight, but better. I put my food inside the cooler to keep insects out. I did not see insects yet, but insects find food. That is what insects do. That evening, I hear human voices for the first time since the outbreak began. The voices come from above the wash, from the ridge, close enough that the sound filters through rock and reaches my pocket in broken pieces. I kill my flashlight and press myself near the entrance wall again. I hear two people, a man and a woman, talking low. I cannot catch every word, but I catch enough. Water, shade, no cars, and the woman saying she does not want to sleep in the open again. Their footsteps crunch on gravel near the fence line. Then the man laughs once, short and tired, and it dies fast. People still laugh sometimes. That does not mean they are safe. Their footsteps move closer to the wash. I hear the woman say, "Hold up," and then there is a pause. I picture her seeing the disturbed sand near my earlier path. My stomach tightens, but I do not name it. I keep still. I keep my hands on my own gear so nothing shifts. The man steps closer. A rock taps against my entrance wall from outside. Not hard. A test. Then another rock harder. The wall does not collapse, but a stone shifts inside and rolls a few inches. I catch it with my hand before it can click against another rock. My fingers close around it, and I hold it there. The man says something I cannot fully hear. Then I hear the woman's voice closer. "It is a hole," she says. "Caved in, maybe. Or somebody did it." The man answers, his voice rough. "Nobody is living in there. No way." The woman does not sound convinced. Their footsteps move around the entrance area. One of them scrapes at the rock face. Not enough to tear it apart yet, but enough to make dust drift from my ceiling. I hold my breath without making a show of it, keeping my jaw loose so my teeth do not click. I wait for a long minute, then another. Finally, I hear them step away. The woman says, "Not worth it. and the man says, "We keep moving." Their voices fade toward the wash bend. I do not relax. I cannot. Now I know the worst truth about this place. It is not invisible. It is only unnoticed until someone has time to notice. Those two have time, and they have needs. If their needs get worse, a collapsed cave starts to look interesting. I spend the next hour reinforcing the entrance from inside without changing how it looks from outside. I add more rock behind the metal mesh. I add a second wire twist at a different angle so pulling one seam does not free the whole thing. I also create a second internal barrier deeper in, using stones to narrow the main pocket, so if someone breaks through the entrance, he does not immediately see my sleeping shelf. I am building layers. Layers are what I have. The next morning, the air smells different. Damp. I crawl to the ceiling crack thread and see that the light is dim behind a haze. Clouds. Desert clouds can mean nothing or can mean trouble. By late afternoon, I hear the first distant thunder. It is low and slow. I move everything up onto my sleeping shelf. I clear a shallow trench in the main pocket floor leading away from the shelf, guiding any water toward the lower passage instead of my bedding. I do this with a flat rock, scraping and scooping dirt and sand into piles. The work is dirty and slow. I take breaks to breathe and to keep dust from choking the air. When the storm hits, it hits hard. Rain in the desert does not start gentle. It arrives in sheets. I hear it through the rock, a steady hiss that turns into a roar when it hits the wash. The cave changes sound instantly. Water starts running somewhere above, finding cracks, soaking dirt, making the rock smell sharper. Then I hear a new sound near the entrance. A heavy rush, then a slap. Water is hitting the rock face outside. The wash is flooding. The entrance wall is holding, but water does not need a full opening. Water finds gaps. A thin stream starts seeping through the lower intake channel I made near the base of the wall. It trickles, then increases, pushing sand and grit with it. The stream heads straight for my sleeping shelf area until it finds my trench and diverts. My trench works. Barely. The problem is not the trickle. The problem is the pressure. The wash outside is pushing water against my sealed entrance. I have no way to look out without opening it. I crouch near the wall and feel the vibration through rock and metal. The whole barrier shivers once, then settles. Dust falls. I wedge another flat stone into the base seam and press my shoulder into the wall from inside. Not because I think my shoulder will stop a flood, but because doing nothing feels worse. Water keeps seeping in. I grab my cracked cooler and start scooping water out of the trench and pouring it deeper into the lower passage where it can soak into sand away from my shelf. I do this again and again, moving in a loop, never fast, never stopping. After what feels like hours, the roar outside starts to fade. The wash flood peak passes. The seep at the entrance channel slows. Muddy water still drips, but it is manageable. I sit on my heels on the shelf and look at the mess. Wet sand, damp tarp edges. My sweatshirt filter now soaked. The cave air is heavy with moisture, and the draft through the ceiling crack feels weak. Humid air does not move the same way. I crawl to the upward vent crack I widened and pry another small stone free. The draft strengthens a bit. It is not enough to dry everything fast, but it gives the cave a chance to breathe again. The storm leaves behind a worse outside world. When the light thread returns in the crack, it is filtered through dust and a gray sky. I do not go out. The wash will be soft and full of obvious tracks, and any infected that wandered into the flood might be washed closer. Also, people follow water. People move toward fresh puddles, toward damp ground, toward anything that suggests life. I stay in and focus on what I can control. I spread my tarp and sweatshirt so they dry in the faint moving air. I rotate my supplies, putting anything damp on rock so it can air out. I also start digging a small sump in the lower passage pocket where the drip is. If water collects there during storms, I want it to collect in one spot, not spread through my living area. 2 days after the storm, the voices return. The man and the woman are back, closer, arguing in tight whispers that carry through the rock. This time I hear more. The man is angry about water. The woman is angry about sleeping in the open and being watched at night. The man says there is no point circling the same area. The woman says the wash has water now and they should stay near it. Then the man says, "That cave is a stash, I know it." That sentence lands heavy because it is not fear talking. It is logic. A person sees a collapsed hole near a wash after an outbreak. He thinks supplies. He thinks someone got smart first. He thinks he deserves a share. I move to my entrance wall and put my mouth close to a gap that lets air through but not light. I do not want to talk. Talking means giving a target. Still, if they start digging, silence will not protect me. I speak once, low and flat. "Go away, nothing here." My voice sounds strange in the rock pocket, muffled and wrong. The woman flinches outside. I can tell by the sudden stop in her footsteps. The man says, "I knew it." He steps closer. "Open it," he says. "We do not want trouble." I do not answer right away. I do not negotiate. Negotiations down here mean I admit there is something worth taking. I say, "Leave. I will not open it." The man scrapes at the rocks. Harder now. A stone shifts. Dust falls inside. The wire holds. The woman says, "Stop! You will bring them." The man snaps back, "We need water. We need shade." His words are not wrong. His choices still put me in danger. He hits the rock face again, testing. I do not stab through the gap. I do not shout. I do not do anything dramatic. I crawl backward along my cord line, into the main pocket, and keep moving deeper toward the lower passage. If they break through, I want distance and a plan. My plan is the narrow squeeze in the upward passage that I explored earlier. It is miserable, but an adult carrying gear cannot move through it fast. An infected might not fit at all. That squeeze becomes my fallback. I move my water and food into a deeper niche near that squeeze, doing it in 2 trips, staying low, keeping items from clinking. Outside, the argument sharpens. The woman says, "Do not." The man says, "We are not dying because someone is hiding." Then I hear the scrape of a lighter wheel or a match strike. The sound is small but clear. My earlier thought about smoke returns in full detail. The man is thinking fire. Smoke. Force me out. He is not thinking about oxygen in a cave. He is not thinking about what happens when you turn someone's shelter into a trap. He is thinking in straight lines. That gets people hurt. Smoke enters within minutes. Not a thick cloud at first, just a bitter smell slipping through my intake channel in small gaps. I move fast now, but controlled. I tear a strip off the sweatshirt and wet it with a measured splash from my jug. I press it over the main intake channel inside the rock wall, reducing flow without fully blocking it. If I block it fully, I lose my main air path. I also crawl to the upward vent crack and open it more, prying loose grit and widening the channel so it draws harder. I do not have a fan. I have physics and luck. If the upper vent draws enough, smoke will rise and pull fresh air through smaller cracks instead of through the smoky entrance. The smoke thickens. It stings my eyes and coats my tongue. I move deeper toward the narrow squeeze, staying close to the floor, because smoke collects higher first. I keep the wet cloth over my nose and mouth, not tight, just enough to filter some grit. I listen hard for rock shifting. The man keeps scraping and poking outside, but he does not break through yet. The woman coughs once and says his name, sharp. "Stop, it is filling." The man answers with a curse that I will not repeat. Then he coughs too. Their fire is hurting them as well. Smoke does not respect who started it. I stay low and crawl back toward the vent passage again, forcing myself to do the hard work even while the air tastes bad. I take the broken fence post and pry at the vent crack with more force than before, accepting that I might cut my hands. A small stone breaks free and drops. The draft increases suddenly enough that the smoke shifts. It does not vanish, but it thins in the main pocket. I keep working until the crack is wide enough that I can feel steady airflow against my face. Then I stop, because digging more will fill the air with dust and make everything worse. I crawl back to my shelf area and check the entrance wall. Smoke still seeps, but less. That tells me the upper vent is pulling enough to change the flow direction. Outside, the voices change. The woman is angry now, not scared, angry. "You are going to get us killed," she says. The man answers with something muffled by coughing. Then I hear their footsteps retreat fast over gravel. The fire crackles for a while longer, then the crackle fades, either because they stomp it out or because it runs out of fuel. I do not open my entrance to check. I stay where I am and keep the wet cloth in place until the air clears. The ceiling thread of light is dim from smoke stains on the crack above, but it still exists. The cave is still breathing. By evening, the smoke smell lingers, but it is thinner. I crawl to the entrance wall and listen. I hear something worse than voices. I hear multiple infected outside, drawn by the fire smell and the human noise. Their shuffling overlaps. One bumps the rock face, harder than the earlier lone one did. Another moans, close enough that the sound vibrates through the metal mesh. I press my palm flat against the rock and feel that vibration. The man and woman ran, but they left a trail of sound that collected company. I do not feel relief about that. I feel trapped inside my own solution. The infected linger outside for a long time. They do not dig, they do not plan. They paw and bump and wander. Every bump makes me flinch internally, but I keep my body still and my hands steady on the wire twists. I add another stone wedge from inside. I press 2 larger rocks into place with both hands until my arms shake from effort. If the entrance collapses inward, I lose air. If it collapses outward, I open a hole. Either direction is bad. I need the wall to stay exactly what it is. The next morning, the outside finally quiets. I wait longer anyway. Then I open a tiny viewing gap by shifting a stone behind the mesh. Not enough to show light, just enough to see a sliver of the outside through shadow. I see nothing at first. Then a shape drifts past the opening, slow and close. Gray skin, torn fabric, head lolling. The infected is right there, inches from my hidden seam, unaware that the rock face is not solid. It drags a hand across the slab and keeps moving. I close the viewing gap again and do not touch the entrance for hours. Days pass in a routine that feels both safe and dangerous. I collect drip water, filter it, ration it. I adjust vents, keep dust down by moving slow. I eat through crackers, then one can, then the second protein bar. I do not get comfortable. Comfort makes you sloppy. Every day, I spend time on the emergency route in the upward passage. I keep widening the vent crack and the hollow beside it, not with grand swings, with patient prying and scraping. Rock gives up space slowly. My hands get raw, my nails split. I wrap tape around 2 fingers and keep going. The goal is not a doorway. The goal is an opening big enough that if the entrance fails, I can still crawl out another way. One afternoon, while working in that tight upward passage, I push my fingers into the hollow and feel something shift deeper than loose grit. The air there is cooler and stronger. I pry again, and a thin slab pops free, revealing a narrow vertical slot behind it. The slot rises at an angle. I put my face near it and smell outside air. Real outside air, not recycled cave air. It smells of dust and sun. My throat tightens, and I do not let myself call it hope. I call it an option. I spend the next hours clearing that slot, widening it enough that I can slide an arm up. My fingertips touch a rough surface that feels different from the cave wall, more weathered. That suggests it is closer to the surface. I do not rush to escape through it. Escaping would mean leaving all the work I did, and it would mean crawling out into the open with no idea what waits above. Still, the slot becomes my countdown clock in reverse. The more I widen it, the less trapped I am. That changes how I think. It also changes how careful I stay with the entrance. Blocking the entrance felt smart on the first day. After smoke, after flood seepage, after hearing that man say the cave is a stash, blocking it feels dangerous. It is protection until it is a coffin. That is the premise I cannot ignore. On the next outside run, I choose a time just after dawn. The light is soft, and the wash air is cool. I open my hidden seam and slide out. The ground outside is still marked from the storm, with dried mud lines and debris caught in brush. Tracks are everywhere. Some are older, some are fresh. I do not try to name every one. I move to the abandoned pickup again and strip it more carefully. I take a second plastic jug from the bed, empty but intact. I take a folded blanket that smells of sweat but can still insulate. I find a small box of trash bags and take those too, because plastic is versatile without being loud. On the way back, I spot something near a clump of brush, a blackened patch where the man's fire was. Nearby, I see a shoe and a piece of fabric. No movement. I do not go closer. I do not need the details. I need to get back inside without being followed. Back in the cave, I reorganize again. I set one jug in the drip pocket so it can collect slow water without me moving bottles back and forth. I hang a trash bag in the upward passage near the vent crack, using fence wire to suspend it, creating a crude baffle that catches dust and also marks the passage in the dark. I do not want to get lost again. Getting lost down here is not dramatic. It is simple. You turn wrong once, you crawl 5 minutes. You stop recognizing the walls. Your light dims. Then you start making faster choices. Faster choices are the ones that kill you. I test the new vertical slot carefully. I tie my cord around my waist and anchor the other end to my sleeping post. I wedge my shoulders into the slot and push upward an inch at a time, using feet on one wall and knees on the other. It is tight enough that I can feel rock pressing my ribs. I do not force it. I back down, clear more grit, widen one edge with the fence post, then try again. After several tries over several days, I get far enough up that I can see a faint glow above. Not the bright thread from the old crack, but a broader smear of light. That means the slot ends somewhere near the surface behind a thin rock layer or a rubble plug. I stop there and mark the spot with 3 scratches in the rock. I can reach this point again. That matters. The next storm comes a week later. I know it is coming because the cave air changes again, cooler and damper before the rain even arrives. This time I am ready. I clear the entrance intake channel and place a removable stone that I can shift quickly if water pressure rises. I deepen my trench and reinforce the sump pocket with more stones, creating a shallow basin that can hold water without it spreading. When the rain hits, the wash roars again, but the seep at the entrance stays smaller because my intake channel is partially blocked with that wet cloth barrier I learned during the smoke incident. The cave still breathes through the upper vent and the new slot, so I can afford to restrict the entrance channel during a flood. Water collects in the sump, and I scoop it into a jug. It is muddy, but it is water. And in this world, water is money you cannot spend anywhere else. After the storm, I do something that feels reckless, but is actually planned. I use the new slot route to break through to the surface in a controlled way. I do it in the late afternoon, when shadows are long and glare is lower. I climb the slot to my marked point, then use the fence post as a lever against the thin rock layer. I pry slow, listening for cracks that mean the slab is giving. A small piece breaks free and drops past my shoulder, hitting the rock below. Air rushes in stronger, carrying dust and the smell of wet earth from the storm. I pry again, widening the gap until I can push my fingers through and feel loose gravel and plant roots. That means I am right under the surface, probably under brush or a rock pile. I push carefully until a fist-sized hole opens. Light spills in, dim and filtered. I do not push my head out. Not yet. I just sit there and breathe the outside air through that hole, then cover it with a flat stone from below so it is hidden again. Now I have 2 exits, but only one is visible. That changes my survival math. I am no longer forced to treat the entrance wall as the only lifeline. I can keep it blocked for camouflage and still escape if someone tries to smoke me out again. I can also use the new hole to vent air during storms and after dusty work. Still, the new hole is also a risk. If a snake crawls in, if insects find it, if a person above steps near it and notices warm air rising, the hole becomes a problem. Every solution in this place has teeth. I accept that and keep working. I line the new hole from below with a ring of small stones, creating a stable collar. I hang a scrap of trash bag behind it as a light baffle tied with wire so no direct light shaft reaches deep into my living area. I stay in the cave longer than I planned. At first I tell myself it is for safety. Then I realize it is also because the cave is predictable. Predictable is rare now. Outside, anything can happen. Inside, the problems are mostly the ones I already met. Air, water, getting lost, unwanted attention. I can work those problems with my hands. I can solve them in inches. That keeps me moving, keeps my head straight. I do not pretend that means I am happy. It means I am functional. One morning, while checking the drip pocket, I find fresh marks in the sand. Not animal prints, human fingers dragging, or a boot scuff. Someone has been in the lower passage. The sand is disturbed in a way that does not match my pattern. My cord line is still intact. My bottles are still there. Whoever came in did not find the main pocket, or he did not care to go farther. That is worse than a break-in for supplies. It means someone is exploring the cave system without committing, testing routes, learning. I stand in that pocket with my light off and listen for a long time. I hear nothing. Still, the silence feels different. It feels watched. I do not go hunting for the intruder. Hunting in tunnels is stupid unless you have a team and radios and a clean way out. I am alone, with a pocket knife and rocks. I respond in a way that fits my reality. I tighten my layers, I move my food and water deeper, closer to the squeeze and the new slot. I set small rock trip markers in the lower corridor, stones balanced on edge that will fall and click if someone crawls through. I do not use cans or glass. I use what the cave gives. I also change my outside runs. I stop using the main entrance for exits. I start using the new slot hole that opens under brush. That way, even if someone watches the wash and notices the collapsed entrance, he will not see me leave. Using the new hole is hard work. I climb up to it, push the stone plug aside from below, then carefully push brush and gravel above with my fingertips until I can lift the surface cover enough to slip out. The first time I do it, I break a twig and it snaps loud in the quiet morning. I freeze with my head half out and my shoulders wedged in the hole, stuck in the worst possible posture. No movement follows. Still, I learn the lesson. On the next attempt, I clear the cover more slowly, moving each piece with 2 fingers so nothing pops. Eventually, I get out and find that the hole opens under a clump of scrub and a pile of storm-washed rock. From a few steps away, it looks like nothing. That is what I want. I set the cover back carefully and walk away in a curved path so my footprints do not point straight back. Outside, the world is louder than it used to be, even when it is quiet. Flies. Distant metal clanks from wind pushing something loose on a fence. A far-off engine that could be real or could be my imagination. I move along the ridgeline instead of the wash, staying higher so I can see. I spot a small camp in the distance, smoke thin and careful. I avoid it. I spot a line of infected moving in a loose cluster through brush, drawn by something I cannot see. I avoid that too. My goal is not hero work. My goal is containers, food, and information without contact. I find an abandoned house farther up the ridge, a small place with a tin roof and a porch that has partially collapsed. Inside, it smells of dust and old cooking oil. I take canned food, a jar of peanut butter, and a roll of clean cloth from a linen closet. I do not take everything. I take what I can carry without making trips. Trips create patterns. Patterns get you seen. On the way back, I notice something that makes my skin go cold without me naming it. I see a line of footprints in the damp earth near the wash edge, fresh from the recent storm, heading toward my original cave entrance. Not my footprints. Larger, heavier. The prints stop near the boulder pile where the cave mouth is hidden, then circle, then leave again. That means someone checked the entrance recently. Someone knows there is something there, even if he does not know I have a second exit. I follow the tracks from a distance and see they head toward the fence line, then fade in dry ground. I do not chase. I go home, but home is now a word that feels dangerous to think. Back inside, I sit on my shelf and make a decision I avoided since day one. I will not live down here long term. The cave is a tool, not a future. It saved me from the first wave of chaos and from the people who think fire solves everything. It will not save me from slow problems. Sickness from damp air, a blocked vent, a rockfall, an intruder who decides to wait me out, a flood that pushes harder than my rocks can handle. Blocking the entrance bought time. It also started a countdown. The question is not whether the countdown ends. The question is whether I leave before it does. I start preparing in small steps so I do not panic and rush. I pack food and cloth in trash bags to keep them dry. I fill every container I own with filtered drip water and storm seep water, then let it settle so grit drops to the bottom. I mark the lower passage splits with more rock piles, not because I expect to return, but because if I have to flee through the cave during a chase, I cannot afford to take a wrong turn. I also loosen the entrance wall from inside in a controlled way, removing a few keystones that I can shift fast. I do not open it. I just make it less final. If I need that exit again, I want it available without 10 minutes of wire twisting. The next sign of the intruder comes at night. I'm awake in the dark, listening to the cave's small sounds, when I hear a faint click in the lower corridor. One of my balanced rock markers fell. Not from vibration. The fall is too clean. Then I hear a pause, then another soft scrape. Someone is inside the cave system again, moving slow, careful, possibly following the same caution rules I follow. That is the worst kind of person to meet in a tunnel. I slide off my shelf and crawl toward the internal barrier I built earlier, keeping my light off. I position myself behind rocks where I can see the main pocket floor in shadow. I wait. A dim beam appears in the lower passage, then disappears, then appears again. The light is weak, covered. Someone using the same technique I used when I first explored. A person crawls into the main pocket, moving low. The person is a man, thin, with a cap pulled low, carrying a small pack. He pauses, scans, then crawls toward my entrance wall, touching the rocks with his fingertips. He is feeling for wire, for seams, for man-made structure. He finds a spot and starts working. I do not let it go on. I speak once, louder than before, sharp enough to cut through the cave's muffling. Stop, back out, now. The man freezes so hard his light beam stays locked on one rock. He does not answer right away. He shifts, and the beam wobbles. I cannot see his face fully. I do not move closer. I keep my position and my voice steady. This place is not open. Leave. The man swallows loud enough that I hear it, then says, I smelled smoke here days ago. Thought someone died. His voice is tired, not aggressive. That does not make him safe. He says, I just need water. I answer, no. One word, nothing else. If I offer negotiation, I invite a longer problem. The man stays still for another second, then slowly backs toward the lower passage, keeping his light pointed away from my shelf area. He crawls out without another word. I listen until the faint click of rocks fades. I do not feel victory. I feel a deadline. Now someone else knows for certain a person is inside this cave network. If that man tells anyone, if he comes back with more people, my layered defenses become a trap again. I decide to leave at first light. Not after one more drip bottle fills. Not after one more outside run. First light. I pack in the dark, using touch and memory, keeping items from clinking. I tie my cord into a bundle and strap it to my pack. I tape cloth around metal edges. I fill one jug and take the other half full. Weight matters, but water matters more. I also take the fence wire and the pocket knife and the duct tape. I leave the cooler. I leave the tarp. I do not want to fight with bulk at the hole. At dawn, the ceiling thread returns, pale and thin. I crawl to the new slot exit and push the stone plug aside. I lift brush cover from below and feel cool air spill in. I listen for voices, footsteps, shuffling. Nothing close. I slide out and pull the cover back into place until the hole is hidden again. I lie on my stomach under the brush for a full minute, scanning the ridgeline and the wash. The world looks normal in shape and broken in detail. A fence leaning, a road sign twisted, a distant house with a door hanging open. I stay low and move away from the cave in a curved path, stepping on rock when possible so I leave less track in soft earth. I do not look back until I am far enough that the opening would be hard to spot even if I tried. When I do look back, I see only brush and boulders. That is how it should be. I walk the ridge toward the abandoned house I raided earlier, not to return there, but because I know the terrain between. Familiar ground reduces mistakes. My pack pulls at my shoulders. The jug knocks against my hip with each step, and I steady it with my hand. I keep my head down when I cross open stretches, then lift it to scan each time I reach cover. Twice I stop and kneel to listen. Distant, infected sounds drift from the wash. I keep distance. I do not try to be quiet in a theatrical way. I try to be consistent. Consistency keeps you from stepping on the one stick that snaps. By mid-morning, I reach a low saddle between two ridges and spot movement ahead. 3 infected are wandering near a stand of scrub, spreading out, then converging, pulled by some faint stimulus I cannot see. I drop behind a rock outcrop and wait them out. Waiting is also activity now. Waiting is scanning, measuring, planning. I drink one small mouthful of water and cap the jug tight. The air is already warming. The sun climbs fast in this place. I think about the cave and feel the odd truth. I miss the predictability of it already. Then I remind myself why I left. Predictable can still kill you if it traps you.